The snowfield looked settled. Overnight cold had tightened the surface into a thin, brittle crust, smoothing yesterday's tracks and locking the top layer into something that could briefly carry weight. From a distance, the field appeared uniform, pale, uninterrupted, calm. The fox moved onto it cautiously. Each step was placed with precision. The fox did not trust the surface immediately. It tested with one forepaw first, applying weight gradually, listening for sound and feeling for resistance. The crust held. The paw sank only slightly, compressing the top layer without breaking through. The fox shifted more weight forward, then brought the second paw up. The surface responded evenly. This was workable. The fox continued. Its body stayed low, tail extended straight behind for balance. Movement was slow but efficient, conserving energy while maintaining control. The fox followed a faint scent line that crossed the field diagonally, barely present beneath the snow but readable in subtle variations of air and surface disturbance. The crust carried the fox's weight for several steps in a row. Each footfall left only a shallow impression, a star-shaped mark where the surface flexed but did not collapse. Sound was minimal, soft compression rather than fracture. The fox advanced farther from the tree line. Here, the snow was deeper. Wind had sculpted the surface into gentle ridges and shallow troughs, but the crust remained continuous across them. The fox adjusted stride length slightly, stepping onto flatter sections where pressure would distribute more evenly. Tracking on crust required patience. Moving too fast risked sudden failure. Moving too slowly wasted the advantage of support. The fox balanced speed and caution instinctively, relying on experience rather than calculation. A vole had crossed here earlier. The fox found the signs not in tracks, but in disturbance. A slight collapse near a ridge, a faint tunnel opening sealed again by drift. The prey had moved beneath the crust, hidden from sight. The fox paused. It lowered its head, nose close to the surface, drawing in scent that escaped through tiny fractures in the snow. The smell was faint, but fresh enough to matter. The fox took another step. This time, the surface answered differently. The crust bent farther than before, flexing without sound. The paw sank deeper, but still did not break through. The fox froze immediately, weight held back, muscles tense. The surface recovered slowly when the pressure eased. That was a warning. The fox shifted its stance, redistributing weight more evenly across all four limbs before proceeding. It moved diagonally now, reducing direct downward force on any single point. The crust held again. Confidence returned, not fully, but enough to continue. The fox advanced 2 more steps. On the third, the surface failed. There was no gradual warning. The crust broke cleanly beneath the fox's forepaw, collapsing with a sharp, muffled crack. The leg dropped through into loose snow below, sinking nearly to the elbow before stopping. The fox reacted instantly. Its body lunged backward, hind legs pushing hard against the crust behind. Snow shattered outward where weight transferred suddenly. The surface that had held moments before now fractured in a widening circle. The fox pulled the trapped leg free and sprang backward. For a moment, the fox lost balance. The crust broke again beneath one hind paw, dropping it briefly before catching. The fox twisted its body, tail flaring for balance, then leapt clear onto a section that still held. The fox stood still. Breathing quickened slightly. Muscles remained tight, ready for another collapse. The fox did not move until the surface beneath all 4 paws proved stable again. The snowfield was no longer uniform. The failure had exposed a weak layer beneath, a pocket of unconsolidated snow where warmth or pressure had undermined the crust from below. From above, there had been no visible difference. The fox looked down at the broken area. Jagged edges of crust surrounded a depression of loose powder. The scent line continued across it, uninterrupted. The fox did not follow immediately. Instead, it circled the collapse carefully, testing nearby sections with light pressure. Some held, others flexed too much. The field had changed. What had been a continuous surface was now a patchwork of trust and risk. Each step beyond this point would require renewed testing. The fox backed away slowly. It had not been injured. The failure had not cost more than time and energy. But it had revealed something critical. The surface could not be relied upon consistently, even within a small area. The fox returned to the edge of the field and paused. From here, it reassessed the route. The scent line still mattered, but crossing open crust now carried unpredictable cost. Alternative paths along wind-packed edges or drift shadows near vegetation might offer more reliable footing. The fox did not abandon the hunt, but it adjusted its understanding. The snow crust had not failed gradually. It had held perfectly until it did not. And as the fox stood at the boundary between stable support and sudden collapse, it became clear that the challenge ahead would not be finding prey beneath the snow, but moving across a surface that offered no warning before giving way and deciding how much uncertainty the body could afford before the hunt itself became secondary to staying upright at all. The fox did not return to motion immediately. It stood where the crust still held, legs braced, weight distributed carefully across all four paws. The body remained angled slightly backward, ready to retreat if the surface beneath shifted again. The broken section lay just ahead. Jagged fragments of crust outlined the collapse, their edges sharp and irregular. Beneath them, loose snow had settled unevenly, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The contrast was subtle, but now visible. The fox watched. The field no longer read as continuous. What had seemed uniform minutes earlier now revealed variation, small changes in texture, faint depressions, areas where wind had thinned the crust without leaving obvious signs. The fox lowered its head again. Scent still crossed the break. The vole had passed through without disturbing the surface, moving below the crust where weight did not concentrate. The fox's problem was not location of prey, it was access. The fox tested the snow again, but differently now. Instead of stepping forward, it scraped lightly with the edge of a paw, applying horizontal pressure rather than vertical weight. The crust resisted, then cracked in a narrow line without collapsing fully. That was useful. The fox moved a half step sideways and tested again. This section flexed but held. The fox noted the difference. Movement would no longer be linear. The fox shifted its route, angling toward a shallow ridge where wind had compressed the surface more firmly. These ridges often held longer, though they could also conceal voids beneath. The fox stepped onto the ridge. The crust held, but the sound changed. The compression produced a sharper note, indicating thinner structure. The fox paused, then continued, placing the next step closer to the ridge's crest where pressure would spread. Progress resumed slowly. Each step followed a pattern now. Test, wait, commit, withdraw. The fox moved only when the surface responded predictably. Momentum was gone. Caution replaced flow. The fox reached the far edge of the collapsed area. From here, the scent line bent slightly, following the vole's path beneath the snow. The fox tracked it with its nose rather than its feet, keeping weight on known sections while reading direction from air. The surface failed again, but less dramatically. This time, a hind paw broke through only partially, sinking to the ankle. The fox corrected immediately, shifting weight forward and outward, freeing the paw without a jump. The fox froze. The failure was smaller, but it confirmed the pattern. The crust was inconsistent here, weakened from below in scattered pockets. The fox backed away again, returning to the ridge. It stood still and reassessed. Continuing straight across would require repeated testing and frequent corrections. Each failure increased energy cost and noise, and risked injury over time. The hunt would become inefficient long before it succeeded. The fox looked toward the field's edge. Near low shrubs and grass tufts, the snow appeared disturbed by wind and trapped debris. These areas often supported stronger crust where vegetation anchored the surface, or at least offered predictable collapse zones that could be navigated with rhythm. The fox turned slightly. This was not abandonment of the trail, it was rerouting. The fox began moving parallel to the scent line instead of directly along it, keeping to ground where the surface announced its weakness earlier rather than failing without warning. Steps here produced consistent crunch and shallow collapse, but not sudden drops. The fox accepted this. Predictable failure was preferable to unpredictable support. The fox moved steadily now. Speed was reduced, but control returned. Each step sank slightly, but evenly. Balance remained intact. Behind it, the broken crust marked the place where trust had ended. Ahead, the path was longer, less direct, but readable. The fox continued tracking, nose low, body relaxed just enough to move efficiently again. The surface beneath was no longer something to be relied upon blindly. It was something to be managed, section by section, decision by decision. The lesson was clear and immediate. A surface that failed suddenly did not need to fail often to become unusable. One collapse was enough to force recalibration. From that point on, every step carried the memory of the drop. And as the fox moved along the safer edge of the field, leaving the deceptive crust behind, it carried forward the understanding that hunting across snow was never only about scent and patience, but about reading when the ground itself stopped being a partner and became an obstacle that demanded as much attention as the prey beneath it. The fox moved along the edge of the field without haste. Here, the snow no longer pretended to support weight fully. Each step sank a predictable amount, compressing loose layers down to firmer snow beneath. The rhythm was slower, but it was honest. The fox adjusted to it quickly. Muscles worked in a steady pattern now, expecting resistance rather than support. Balance returned because the surface no longer surprised. Every step gave feedback before committing the full weight. The scent line remained close. It ran beneath the snow at a shallow angle, occasionally rising where the vole had pushed closer to the surface before diving again. The fox followed it with its nose, keeping its body angled slightly away from the center of the field. This separation mattered. Attention was now divided. One part tracked prey, the other tracked ground. The fox paused frequently, not from uncertainty, but to resynchronize. Each pause allowed the surface to settle after compression, letting the fox feel whether the snow rebounded or remained soft. The crust lay just a few body lengths away. From here, it still looked smooth, intact, almost inviting. The collapse had not propagated far. Most of the surface remained visually unchanged. That made it dangerous. The fox knew now that appearance meant little. The crust could hold weight for one step and fail on the next without warning. The fox did not need further confirmation. The scent shifted slightly. The vole had altered course, angling back toward the open field. Its movement was faster now, less cautious. The fox recognized this pattern. The prey sensed pursuit and was seeking speed over concealment. That forced a choice. Following the vole directly would mean returning to the unreliable crust. Staying on the edge would lengthen the route and increase the distance between hunter and prey. The fox stopped. This pause was longer than before. The fox stood with its forepaws on compressed snow and its hind paws still on firmer ground, body bridging two conditions. The position allowed comparison, support versus predictability. The fox chose predictability. It continued along the edge, parallel to the vole's path rather than converging on it. The fox relied on endurance rather than interception. The snow here behaved consistently. Each step sank, compressed, and stopped. There were no sudden drops. The fox's movement regained efficiency even if speed was limited. The fox advanced steadily. Minutes passed. The scent remained strong enough to track but did not intensify. The vole was moving, not stopping. The fox adjusted expectations accordingly. The crust crept closer again as the field narrowed. Here, wind had scoured the surface unevenly, thinning snow in patches and exposing underlying layers. The fox tested carefully. A paw touched crust. It held briefly, then cracked audibly without collapsing fully. The fox withdrew immediately. This was thinner than before, dangerous in a different way. The fox altered course again, stepping onto a line of shallow drifts formed by the leeward side of the field. These drifts were deeper but lacked a crust, offering consistent resistance. The fox moved through them with effort but without surprise. Breathing deepened slightly, muscles warmed. The fox accepted the cost. The hunt was no longer about speed, it was about maintaining function. The fox paused again, lifting its head. Sound travelled differently here. Snow absorbed noise unevenly. The fox listened for movement beneath the surface. Faint scratching, shifting snow, the subtle sounds of prey pushing through tunnels. There was nothing close. The vole had gained distance. The fox lowered its head and resumed movement. This time, the fox slowed further, conserving energy. Chasing across unstable ground would only compound risk. The fox relied on persistence instead. The snow continued to demand attention. Every few steps, the fox tested sideways, probing for changes in structure. Each probe informed the next step. The fox's body language shifted. Tail lowered slightly. Head remained low but not tense. This was not pursuit posture. It was travel posture under constraint. The fox had not lost the hunt, but the hunt had changed character. The surface failure had introduced a second objective: remain upright, uninjured and efficient long enough for opportunity to return. As the fox moved along the uneven boundary between deceptive crust and honest snow, it carried a growing understanding that the most dangerous moments were not the dramatic collapses, but the ones that did not happen yet, the sections that still looked intact, still promised support, and still invited a step that could cost balance at exactly the wrong time. The fox moved on, patient, deliberate, and alert. Not because prey was near, but because the ground itself had become an active variable, one that could not be outrun or ignored, only managed step by step until either the scent strengthened again, or the surface stopped pretending to be something it was no longer willing to be. The fox slowed until movement became deliberate rather than responsive. The edge of the field offered consistency, but not opportunity. The crust lay nearby, smooth and silent, still carrying the illusion of speed. Between ними существовал выбор, который больше нельзя было откладывать. The fox stopped completely. It stood with all four paws planted in compressed snow, feeling the ground settle beneath its weight. There was no rebound, no crack, no delayed collapse. What the surface offered was exactly what it delivered. The fox lifted its head and listened. Sound was muted here, absorbed by softer layers. Nothing moved close enough to suggest an imminent chance. The vole's scent had thinned slightly, stretched by distance and time. The hunt was no longer immediate. The fox looked back toward the open crust. From this angle, it appeared intact again. The broken section was partially hidden by shallow drift and light. If the fox did not remember the failure, there would be no reason to doubt it. But memory mattered. The fox stepped one paw onto the crust again, carefully, without committing weight. The surface flexed, not much, just enough. The fox withdrew the paw immediately. That was enough information. The crust was still lying. It could hold briefly, convincingly, and then fail without warning. That kind of surface demanded constant testing and constant correction. It would consume attention that should be reserved for prey. The fox turned away. It did not abandon the scent entirely. It adjusted its approach, moving farther along the edge where shrubs and wind-sculpted drifts created a broken but honest terrain. Here, collapse was expected. Support was never promised. Movement became steady again. Each step sank, compressed, and stopped. The fox's body adapted fully, muscles working rhythmically, balance predictable. The ground no longer demanded constant interrogation. The fox paused once more. This time, the pause was not tactical. It was evaluative. Continuing the hunt across this field would be possible later, when temperature dropped again, when crust thickened uniformly, or when the prey moved closer to stable ground. For now, the cost exceeded the return. The fox lifted its head and changed direction. It followed the edge toward cover, where snow met brush and shadow, where movement could resume under conditions that rewarded patience rather than punished trust. The field remained behind it. The crust still lay smooth and pale, unchanged in appearance. Anyone crossing it later might find it holding perfectly, or might find it failing just as suddenly. The fox did not need to prove the point again. It moved on, body relaxed, attention returning outward rather than downward. The hunt was deferred, not lost. The lesson remained exact. A surface that failed once without warning could not be treated as neutral again. From that moment on, it became something that required negotiation rather than confidence. And when the ground demanded as much focus as the prey, the hunt itself lost clarity. The fox chose ground that told the truth. Snow that yielded consistently, even if slowly, was preferable to snow that promised support and then withdrew it suddenly. Control mattered more than speed. Predictability mattered more than apparent advantage. As the fox disappeared into terrain shaped by wind, brush, and honest collapse, the field stayed silent behind it, its crust intact, smooth, and still capable of betraying the next body that trusted it without remembering how quickly support could vanish when the surface failed suddenly.